All right. So again, I'm Abby Artemisia of the Wander School. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a botanist, herbalist, author, botanical educator, and I would love to meet all of you. And I'm so glad that you're here today because this is one of my favorite subjects. This is where I live, and I love Appalachia, and I feel so blessed to live here. It is one of the most biodiverse regions in the world. So we're all lucky to live here. So if you want to, yeah, feel free to type in the chat, hello, tell us where you're coming from. If you have a cup of tea today, you can tell us what kind of tea you have. I have my new favorite mug here. Just got back from a trip to Maine and found this in a Goodwill with my partner. So that's pretty lucky. So yeah, we're gonna jump in, and you don't have to have any prior knowledge to get into this. This is what I love doing. I teach to people of all varying levels of education and skill. So yeah, I'm going to start this slideshow here, but again, feel free to type questions in the chat and I'll answer them either during or after as I can get to them. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen with y'all so you can see this slideshow. That would probably be helpful. And hopefully I'll get the right one here to pop up. Okay, great. So I'm going to put this into present mode. Also, let me know if y'all can't hear me or there's any other weird technical snafus, which hopefully there will not be. Okay, so here we are, Appalachian wild herbs of summer, yay. And that's me. My school is the Wander School. It stands for Wild Artemisia Nature Discovery Empowerment and Reconnection School. It's quite a mouthful, but I stand for all of those things. So, oh, look, there's a typo right there. So that should have an S in it. I am human. What can I say? There's a deer and it is enjoying all of the wild herbs. So yay for that. Okay, so moving on, let's get into the meat. Okay, so I have to have a little disclaimer here, right? Always have 100% positive identification before ingesting anything. If you know me at all, if you've been to any of my classes or checked out the Wander School YouTube channel, you will know that I say this all the time because I feel like it can't be said enough. I don't want anybody to be scared, but I like to teach, you know, cautious optimism. So that means that we're not scared of foraging, but we are careful, right? That we never put anything in our mouths or on our bodies unless we're absolutely sure that we know what it is. It's really important. There's not that many super poisonous plants around here, but there are some, and they are very poisonous, just like a handful of them. So just FYI for you. So the first plant that we're going to talk about is, I feel like, one of the most beautiful blooming plants right now. And I want to encourage you to connect with these plants. And so if you have them growing near you, which a lot of you may, especially this goldenrod, then go out and sit with it, enjoy it, pick some. If you're absolutely sure that's what you have, then make a cup of tea with it. And you can harvest the flowers and the leaves. So basically all the above ground parts, the stems will work as well. And so I put the Latin in here just for those of you who are interested. You don't have to learn that at all. If you don't want to, it's totally fine. And this is in the aster family. And so when I teach, I'm a botanist, so I teach about plant families because I feel like sometimes it can make it easier to learn. So this is in the aster family. If you look at each one of those teeny tiny yellow flowers, they look like a tiny daisy. So when flowers are the shape of a daisy, that usually means that they're in this aster family, because a lot of the plants that we have here in Appalachia are in this family. So it's great that this plant is still around and blooming right now. I feel like it's one of the last to keep blooming. So depending on the species, there are like, I think I heard 10 species of goldenrod around here. So there are quite a few. They can look really different. There are some woodland species, and those will sometimes have like a black stem, and they'll have flowers that are not as much in clusters, but kind of spread out along the stem. So they can look different. And we can see this beautiful butterfly really enjoying these flowers. And so can we. So this is about herbs, but I mean, if we eat our medicine, then it's about food too, right? And so you can actually eat these flowers. Now, goldenrod gets a bad rap, unfortunately. It gets blamed for people's allergies. So like hay fever kind of allergies. And that's usually because it's blooming at the same time as ragweed, which a lot of people are allergic to, which is incidentally also in the aster family. But supposedly the pollen of goldenrod is really large. I was going to say like that. I don't think it's quite that large though, but it's really large. It's sticky and it just doesn't fly well. So to be technical and a little graphic, it would be hard for it to get up your nose and make you sniffly. But the cool thing about it is that it has some astringent and antihistamine powers. So it's actually good for hay fever and ragweed allergies. So pretty cool. I really like making a tea out of it, or a tincture, which is an extract, usually an alcohol extract. So I have a book called The Herbal Handbook for Homesteaders on my website, and which is thewanderschool.com with an S. And I talk about goldenrod, and I talk about how to make a tincture. So you can check that out. And so this is one of the prime ingredients in my allergy tincture blend. And this is the perfect time to harvest it. So again, we can harvest all those above ground parts, what we call the aerial parts in herbalism. And we can tincture them, we can dry them, we can make tea out of them, fresh or dried. All that good stuff. So it's astringent, which is kind of drying, also can shrink things like tissues. It's antihistamine, which helps with the allergies, analgesic, so that means it helps with pain, along with that anti-inflammatory action. It's antifungal, which is pretty cool. All these big words, right, that we use as herbalists. So I'll try and explain them. But diuretic means it can make you pee, which sometimes we need that. And an expectorant, so again, a great thing in an allergy formula to help get any mucus up and out. And an analgesic. So again, oh, I put that in twice. Wow. I was working on this like up till a couple hours ago. So and also at 10 o'clock last night. So don't mind me, maybe some typos. Anyway, so yeah, I have here good for allergies, good for UTIs, so urinary tract infections. And it has that analgesic action. I think it also has some antimicrobial action. And so that is how it is helpful with UTIs as well. It can make you pee, which you need to do more often if you have a urinary tract infection. And it can help with pain. I actually found this out from one of my students, which is pretty cool, I thought. She gave me some oil that was infused with goldenrod. And she said that she had found it was especially great for menstrual pain. And I tried it and it worked. And so I started rubbing it on for other kinds of pain. And I really like it a lot. Looking at the more energetic or woo-woo side, there are some people who say that these bright yellow flowers of any plant really hold in the sunshine of the season. So I really feel that way about goldenrod because it's like one of the last things to bloom. And it's just like, as you can see here, it just gets totally illuminated in the sunshine. It's so much yellow, and really feels like that when I drink the tea, that it just holds in that sunshine energy. And also, if you want to, you can research flower essences. I think they're really interesting. I love them and take them. And they, I haven't looked up goldenrod essence, but to me, it would have that kind of uplifting, sunshiny feeling. So I put at the bottom here, goldenrod versus ragweed. So that's what I was just talking about with how it gets blamed for ragweed allergies. But we can look at this next slide. And this is what ragweed looks like. And interestingly enough, ragweed is actually an astringent, and some people say an antihistamine as well. So I know folks who will harvest the leaves, especially of the common ragweed, the smaller one here on the right, and make tincture out of that for ragweed and other allergies. So super cool when you start getting into herbalism and learning this stuff. Some of you may recognize these plants, some of you may not, but the giant ragweed gets super huge, like up to 10 feet tall. It's crazy. And the common ragweed stays short. So interestingly, right, this first part of the Latin name ambrosia, it's kind of funny, right? It's not what we think about when we think about ragweed and ambrosia. And I first heard that's because people looked at it as an ambrosia. They thought that it was delicious and would cook it up. And so I never knew about that before. I also was doing some research the other day and just found out that ambrosia can actually mean aromatic. So it's an aromatic plant. It has a strong smell to it. So super interesting, but you've probably seen one or both of these growing as weeds, possibly in or around your garden or in your yard. And the thing that we're really looking at is this column growing up out of the ragweed. And that's where all the pollen is going to be. So if you do have ragweed in your yard and you don't want to pull it all out, just mow it when it starts to get those columns, and then you won't get the pollen, and that will be helpful. So do y'all have any questions? I'm not seeing much in the chat here, so feel free, please. Again, there are no stupid questions, so please type them in. Tell us what kind of tea you're drinking. I am drinking some Yopan, which I love. You may have heard me talk about it before, but it's in the holly family, and it is the only native North American plant with a decent amount of caffeine. But I feel like it's a really gentle caffeine, and it's time released. I love it. So you can check that out. My friends with the Yopan Tea House in Savannah, but this Yopan I harvested myself when I was down south, and I really love it and its health benefits. I put in here some anise hyssop from the garden and some rose of Sharon that I harvested because it's got this mucilaginous quality. So you could still pick those leaves, and if yours is still flowering, you could pick the flowers and dry them and or make tea out of them. I think I have a video up of that maybe on YouTube or Instagram or both. So you can check that out, but it helps soothe my throat if I'm talking a lot. So that's kind of cool. And then some Tulsi and a surprise herb that we're going to talk about in a minute at the very end. So feel free to type in the herbs that are in your tea if you're drinking tea, or your favorite tea herbs. For those of you who don't know, I had my own tea company for 5 years. So I'm really into tea. It's a thing. Okay, so this one most people probably wouldn't think of as a late summer herb, but I wanted to include it because I just harvested a bunch like 2 days ago. And it's kind of a cool story. So there's a community garden within walking distance of my house. And somebody years and years ago planted a bunch of stinging nettle, which looks like this. And it took off because that's what it does. It's really good at growing. And so it's just kind of all over the place now. And so the folks who garden there encourage other people to come and harvest it so it doesn't get too out of control. And the cool thing is that when people harvest it and or when they mow it back or they weed eat it, it won't flower and go to seed as much. It'll just keep those really nice fresh greens like this. So I'll just keep harvesting it. There's like some weird debate out there about whether it's dangerous to harvest it once it flowers. And I've talked to some of the biggest, most experienced and skilled, knowledgeable herbalist researchers in the world, and they said there's actually no evidence out there to prove that. So my theory is that people said that because we don't usually eat greens in our gardens after they flower, right? So I think somebody thought that, and also they can get tougher after they flower. So that's just something for y'all to think about. There are different species of nettles, and so these are in the nettle family, actually. So if you want the Latin, it's Urticaceae, and this species is Urtica dioica, but there's also some debate about that, and there being a couple of subspecies, and this one being European, and there being a subspecies that is native to North America, which is the subspecies gracilis. So again, like, don't worry if you don't know Latin or it's frustrating to you, you can just like throw that out the window, no big deal. But yeah, it does grow in the wild, whether it's native or non-native. You can sometimes find it in the wild. You can also grow it super easily. There is another species, which is in a different genus, which is wood nettle. And that is super edible. I love the taste of it, actually a little bit more than I like stinging nettle, though I eat them both because they're so nutritious. And again, we can eat our medicine and eat our herbs. And yeah, but that one hasn't been widely tested. So there's not as much research on its medicinal benefit. But my theory is that they both are medicinal, and maybe this one is just a little bit more medicinal because it has more stinging hairs. So it has more of the formic acid in it, which coincidentally is in bee stings and ant bites. And that is medicinal. And so it's acts as an antihistamine, it's anti-inflammatory. So there's this kind of funny sounding thing that I talk about called urtication, named after this plant because you do it with this plant. And it's like flagellation. So you're actually smacking yourself with the plant on your joints, like if you have arthritis or where you have pain. And it's anti-inflammatory, and it brings the circulation to the surface, and it really nourishes that part of the body. So it's really interesting. And I have to say, I have done this to myself on purpose and by accident, by just walking through nettles, and it does really work. So you don't have to do this. If it's scary, don't worry about it. But we can harvest these. I'll usually harvest them with pruners, or you could use scissors, and I'll cut them like above the last pair of leaves, or maybe the second to the lowest pair of leaves, and then take that whole stem and cook with it fresh or dry it. And then I'll have it all winter for tea, but I'll also have it during allergy season. So You could take it now. I feel like allergies are coming back around now with the ragweed blooming. You can also start taking it in the spring, but probably late winter. So a few months before allergy season starts, and that will tonify your body to be ready for allergy season. It's pretty cool. So, oh, sorry, I want to go back. So that's nettles, but besides allergies, well, it also has all of these minerals, all of these vitamins that are in here, and it's very high in protein. That's pretty cool, but I found out today too that it has more grams of vitamin C, I think it was grams, anyway, maybe milligrams of vitamin C per gram of plant than oranges and citrus fruit. So there you go, eat your nettles. But it's also great for healthy hair. And so eat your nettles and you'll have shiny, healthy hair. And that's probably just because it's tonifying the body. And so you're getting more nutrition. I also recently found out that the root of nettles is good for prostates, specifically enlarged prostates, which quite a few men deal with. So it's good to know an option for that. The seeds, however, so if it does go to seed, the seeds are good for nourishing the adrenals, which I feel like we could all use. So you want to preferably harvest them when the seeds are green, so a little bit immature, and then you can eat them, you can dry them, you can tincture them, all of these things. I think they're kind of tasty. And yeah, just start slow. So, start with less than a teaspoon, like maybe a quarter teaspoon or even less, and then work your way up. So you can research that on how to do that, but it's kind of cool that it does that, I think. And then I have cut and come again. So if you're not familiar with that, it's kind of like how you harvest lettuce. And when you harvest lettuce, if you're not harvesting it for the head, or like say kale, you'll just take the outer leaves and then leave the rest of the plant there and you can keep harvesting it. So it's sort of like that, except like I said, we can cut the stem down close to the bottom and then we can come back and it will just keep growing and we can keep harvesting. So pretty cool. We can keep doing that pretty much spring through fall. So it's a great plant. All right. So this beautiful plant, which I have to say, this may be a little inappropriate, but like to me, that plant looks very sexy. Just saying. Anyway, this is jewelweed. Some of you may know this plant, some of you may not, but I think that it's important we all get to know this plant, especially if you're allergic to poison ivy. And FYI, if you think that you're not, you can always become allergic. So be careful. But yeah, it's really cool. Nature is so cool. This is the natural antidote to poison ivy. So, and it also loves to grow in the same habitat as poison ivy. So the understory of the woods where it's moist and partially shady. And these are two different species of the same plant. Sometimes you'll have them both growing near you. And again, they look very similar. And so they're in the impatiens genus. So if you have impatiens that are flowers that are ornamental growing near you, then they're related to these flowers. Kind of interesting. Other names for this plant are sometimes touch-me-not or spotted touch-me-not, not because you shouldn't touch them, but because they have these seeds that you can see a little bit in here. These are the seed pods behind this yellow jewelweed. And when they're mature, it's so fun to do with kids or just by yourself. You can just gently touch them and they'll explode. And that's not dangerous. It's just a really cool technique they've developed to spread their seeds. So plants are super smart. But anyway, if you know that you've brushed up against poison ivy very recently, like on the walk that you're on, you can gather some stems of jewelweed. And if it's like usually more during the spring, but if it's been raining a lot recently, it has been here, those stems might still be pretty juicy. And you can just kind of like take your thumbnail and slice them open, or a knife, and just take the inside of that stem and rub it on where you brushed the poison ivy. And if you do it soon enough, it can actually prevent you from getting a rash. It's super duper cool. So if it's not very juicy, I will just cut that stem near the bottom and then take all of it, including the leaves and the flowers, and I'll crush it up with my hands, and it will start to get juicy, and then you can rub that on. Some other things you can do are simmer it for a while in water and strain it and freeze it into ice cubes, and then you'll just have it available whenever you need it. And so if you don't do that soon enough to when you brush the poison ivy, then it will just be temporary relief, which can also be helpful if you already have a rash. You can do that. You can put this into salves because it's generally skin soothing. I wouldn't do that if it was poison ivy though, because you want to dry it out. You don't want to keep it wet. But one thing I also do, which I think may be in my book, The Herbal Handbook for Homesteaders, is I'll make my own witch hazel. So you could also just buy some witch hazel from the store, but I make it from the witch hazel plant, and then I will infuse it with jewelweed. So the whole above ground parts, along with the next plant that I'm going to show you. And then I'll put it in a spray bottle when it's done after I've strained it out, and then you have a great poison ivy spray. So those are some interesting ideas for you that I hope are helpful. All right, y'all. If you have any questions, just ask. Okay, so next we have plantain. Some of you may know this already, but if you don't, you should. And FYI, this is where botany can get confusing, is with English names of plants. So one plant can have multiple English names, or multiple plants can have the same English name. So this one is not actually related to the banana-like plant, all right? The plant that has the banana-like fruit on it, that's called plantain as well. So not related to that at all, just called that. And actually, yeah, the genus of this one is Plantago, and there's different species, and that means the sole of the foot. So I guess somebody thought maybe it looked like the sole of a foot, or it grows really low to the ground, and it loves to grow where the soil is compacted, meaning that where people step a lot or drive a lot, the soil will be compacted, and plantain loves it there. And interestingly enough, this is also a lot of times where you'll find bees, and where you will get stung by a bee. This is my favorite plant for bee stings. You can make what is called a spit poultice, and kids love this. And the simplest way is just to take the leaf of this plant, of course, assuming that you know what it is and have 100% positive identification, and you can chew it up and just put it on wherever you got stung by a bee, spit and all. And surprisingly, they say that it actually works better if it's your own spit. So you can do this for other people with your spit if they're not weirded out about that. But sorry, there's a hummingbird right outside the window. It's distracting. But you can just put that right on your bee sting, and that works for other things too, like burns. It's very drawing, so it draws out the bee venom, but it can also draw out splinters and bacteria. I read some research that said that plantain is actually super effective for MRSA and other staph infections, which is really great to know. So yes, I love this weed. Yay for weeds. And as you can see in these pictures, there are actually 3 species that I know of this plant in Appalachia. There is one that is native, and that is the lower one on the left, Plantago rugelii, which I swear I'm going to create a better name for than Rugel's plantain. So as I always say, unfortunately, some of these are named after old dead white dudes. So seems like we could come up with a better name. So if you have one, please let me know. But this one, you can't really see it in this picture, but it will have red or kind of maroon at the base of these leaves. And that's how you know it's this species, but it doesn't, I don't think, people have different opinions about which one is the most medicinal. I think they're all medicinal. So I'll work with all 3 of the species. The one on the right there on the bottom is Plantago major, or sometimes called broadleaf plantain or large leaf plantain. And then the one on the top is Plantago lanceolata, which is narrow leaf or lance leaf plantain. So all of them are medicinal. The seeds are a laxative. So if you needed that, you could just harvest those seeds on those long spikes and cover them with warm or cold water, just room temperature water or cold. And it would get kind of slimy because it's mucilaginous, my favorite word in herbalism. And you could drink that and it would help as a laxative. So lots of awesome things about this plant. The leaves and the seeds are also edible. It is super prolific, so we don't need to worry about over harvesting it. You can also put it into a poultice or a salve, and you can put it into that spray I was talking about. So with the jewelweed in the witch hazel, you can combine that with plantain as well and infuse plantain and jewelweed in witch hazel. And it will work great for poison ivy, but also for lots of other skin irritations. So FYI, there you go. All right. Any questions? Anybody? Okay. So next, one of my very favorite plants in the whole world. This is elderberry. I have some bumper stickers that I need to get out into the world that say elderberries for everyone, because I truly believe that everyone should have elderberries, except, well, first of all, anybody could be allergic to anything. I know lots of people with interesting allergies that nobody else I know has an allergy to. But also I have read and talked to some folks who do have issues with elderberries if they have an autoimmune issue. And what I've mostly heard is that they can be okay with elderberries as long as they're not having a flare up of their autoimmune issue. But some people who have autoimmune issues just might not be good with elderberries at all. So that's definitely something to think about. Well, there's a lot of great things about elderberry. So I should mention that these are a berry that is actually not edible raw. So you could eat a few of them and you'd be fine, but they do actually have cyanide in them. So we don't want to just start eating them by the handful. We want to process them, and exposing them to heat will do that. So we can make tea out of them, we can make tincture, and that will deactivate it as well. Or my favorite thing is syrup. And so I make an elixir with it with honey and vinegar, and it's delicious. And I also throw in the next 2 plants that we're going to talk about here in a minute. But yeah, right now, really need to go out and look for elderberries before they're all gone if they're not already, because the birds will just devour them often before you get a chance. But you can also grow them relatively easy in your yard, assuming that you have a spot that will stay pretty moist, or you can keep it pretty moist. And they do like acidic soils. So here in Appalachia, we get pretty lucky with that. We have pretty acidic soils most of the time. Elderberry is antiviral and great for coughs, colds, and flus. It's one of the few herbs that has actually been tested quite a bit. So there's actually evidence that proves that. And what they say it does is it actually prevents the flu virus from entering the cells. So super interesting to me. I will say I can't make any claims about COVID, but I have heard from a student of mine who sells a lot of her elderberry syrup to nurses on the front lines of COVID that they've been taking it the whole time and none of them have got it. So I feel like that is pretty good anecdotal evidence or stories, however you choose to look at it. So I'm not making any claims here. I'm just telling you my experience. I've also been taking elderberry syrup the whole time as well during COVID. So fingers crossed, so far so good. It also has a lot of vitamin C in those berries. So anytime we see a really dark colored berry, then we're going to know that it has lots of antioxidants in there. Oh, there's a question. Can I discuss the cytokine storm thing? No. I'm sorry, Heidi, because I feel like that is kind of opening Pandora's box or whatever you want to call it. It is a huge discussion, and I've followed some of it, not all of it. I can tell you from what I've heard and read, well, number one, there's a lot. And for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, don't worry about it. But there's been a lot of controversy about how elderberries can cause the cytokine storm and make you sicker, basically. But yeah, I've heard arguments on both sides, and the stuff that is dispelling that, the information out there that is dispelling that, is basically saying that that is exaggerated. So I don't have the research in front of me, so I can't tell you that. But look it up and you'll find a whole lot about it. So I'm sorry that I don't have that research in front of me. But yeah, I mean, some other things I'm trying to think that I saw. Well, one webinar that I went to, they said that taking elderberry before you get sick and possibly right as you're getting sick is a really good idea, but not if like COVID or the illness continues. So definitely look that up, and I hope that helps. Okay. But also take everything you hear with a grain of salt, even what I say. Do your own research, because you could talk to 10 different herbalists and ask them the same question and get 11 different answers. So just know, but I'm glad you're paying attention. Thank you, Heidi. I appreciate that. All right, next. So beautiful. Okay, so this picture, the description, the caption said that it was our native Carolina rose. So I'm hoping it is. I actually don't see this one that much, unfortunately. The one that I see the most is the invasive rose. So Rosa multiflora, AKA multiflora rose, that many people really don't like because it is so invasive. However, if we harvest those rose hips and make them into things, then it's not so bad, right? And bonus, when we take those fruits out of the environment, we're actually taking the seeds out too, so they won't reproduce. So yay, win-win for everybody. However, unfortunately, the rose hips of multiflora rose are teensy weensy. So you have to decide if it's worth it to you, do a risk benefit analysis to fight all those thorns to get them. I always do. And I think they're great. But I did want to point out that different species of roses, the hips will mature at different times. So with multiflora rose, they actually say to wait until after the first frost, at least, to harvest them, because they they get sweeter because they're very bitter up until then, and they're still bitter after, but they get a little less tart after the frost. However, some roses, by the first frost, the hips are already done. So just keep an eye on the roses around you. I will say, I wanted to show you all this beautiful picture that I took. This is my Instagram feed from the Wander School. You can follow me there and get cool botanical information, ask questions. So I was just in Maine. These are everywhere. This is another invasive rose that is all over the beaches up there, and it's rugosa rose, or Rosa rugosa. And you can just see how beautiful that rose is. Those hips are huge. They're like that big. I actually have some in my dehydrator right now. They take a long time to dehydrate because they're so juicy. But lucky Maine people. What are Maine people? Mainites? I don't know. Somebody tell me. Anyway, so you can grow your own roses, FYI, and grow some with bigger hips. Unfortunately, if you grow knockout roses, they won't get hips because they're bred in some weird way to deadhead themselves. So you don't have to do that. And then you don't get a hip, which is so disappointing. And honestly, I feel like often they don't have much of a smell to them. So what's the point? But that's just my personal opinion. And but rose hips in general, all the ones I know of, are edible and medicinal. Tons and tons of vitamin C, and also vitamin E in those seeds. They have vitamin A as well, and bioflavonoids, which help us to absorb those vitamins. So that's pretty cool. They're also, all those antioxidants are really nourishing for the skin. So they keep our skin regenerating, they keep it looking healthy. You may have seen or even have some rosehip oil. I keep wanting to make some and I haven't, but that would be really fun. I usually just dry these. Honestly, the multiflora rose, the hips are usually pretty dry already when you harvest them. So you can just leave them out and they'll dry like that. But you can put them into tea. You can eat them as is. Some people make preserves out of them. I throw them into my elderberry elixir, and I think it's great. There's lots of differing opinions on how much heat you can expose vitamin C to before it gets degraded. So look that up. A lot of people say do not simmer it at all, like maybe some hot water, maybe not. So that's something to think of for sure. All right. Next. Oh, sorry, I got out of my present mode. Didn't even realize it. Okay, so here we go. Here's our rose hips. And next we have sumac. So this is the other herb that I like to add into my elderberry elixir. And I think all three of those together give it that great, I used to call it high C, which for those of you who are my age or older might think that's kind of funny if you remember the drink high C. But it does really pack a vitamin C punch. And so I love sumac. If you've heard of poison sumac, you don't have to worry as long as the berries are red and you're sure that it's sumac, of course. But poison sumac has white berries. So as long as your sumac has red berries, you're safe. And I know of 3 different species in this region that are edible and have that vitamin C in them. And there's this one, which is smooth sumac. There's staghorn sumac, which is kind of fuzzy. So a lot of times you'll want to strain out those hairs. And then there's winged sumac, which is pretty different. It grows in a much different cluster. It hangs down and it's more pink with a little bit smaller berries, but I still like the taste of it. So again, this has a lot of vitamin C in it. We can just dry those berries. Again, you want to harvest them when it has not recently rained, because the inside of that cluster can stay wet and it can mold, and that really stinks. So we don't want that. But as long as it hasn't rained recently, then you can just leave them out to dry and they'll dry really easily, or throw them in the dehydrator briefly and they'll be fine. It's also astringent, which is great. I've thrown these into my witch hazel formula before for hemorrhoids, and I have seen that in the ethnobotanical history. So that has a history of that for hemorrhoids, these sumac berries. Also, it's a refrigerant. So that means, it's kind of a funny word, that just means it's cooling. So you can make this super easy drink that is super delicious by just taking some of these berries, maybe a small cluster for a gallon or so, and just letting them sit in the water. You could put it in the refrigerator overnight, and you will get this beautiful pink, delicious, cool tea. And you can add mint to that. You can add lemon if you want, but just on its own, it kind of tastes like pink lemonade. It's super delicious. You could add a little bit of maple syrup in there to sweeten it, since the honey won't really dissolve since it's cold. And it is so yummy. It's so refreshing. It'll cool you down on a hot summer day. Really good to know. FYI. And those berries are also made into a spice, just so you know. I have a cookbook, a forage cookbook that came out this year called A Wild Forage Life. That's on the Wander School website. And I have a recipe in there for the Mediterranean spice, the tar, that I make with sumac berries and other local wild herbs. And it's so delicious. I love it on mushrooms, which is what I meant to add here, y'all. And I forgot. Some people wouldn't call them an herb, but I think of them as herbs. So just check out, well, actually, we can go back to my Instagram. Actually, I think it's on my, let's see if it's on there. I'll show you some pictures. Here are, here's me with some chicken in the woods that I found recently. And so there's a lot of mushrooms out now. If you got rainstorms that were remnants of this last hurricane, I said the silver lining of that hurricane was that it brought us rain that brought lots of mushrooms. So just yesterday, I found a whole ton of leatherback milk caps and some lobster mushrooms and some chanterelles. So they're all out now, depending on where you live. But if you live near some moist woodlands, then keep your eyes out, of course, making sure you have 100% positive identification. But I feel like all wild mushrooms are medicinal. They're putting out more and more research that says that they're all anti-carcinogenic. So they can supposedly help fight and prevent cancer. And they can also hold in vitamin D. So that's really cool to have a vegetarian source of vitamin D for those of you who are vegetarians. Really awesome. And they're freaking delicious. So if you don't like mushrooms, I'm sorry, but also maybe you haven't had them cooked right. So check out the cookbook and you can find some recipes. But oh yeah, I think there is one more plant in here. Let's see. Yes. So one of the best I saved for last. I just love passion flower. And I felt like I had to put at least one plant in here that was a calming herb and good for stress, because goodness knows we all have it right now. And if you don't, bless you, you are superhuman. So, but yeah, I also just look at that flower. It's so freaking beautiful. And it's amazing. So we can harvest the leaves and the flowers of passion flower. And of course, if you let it go longer and you're in the right habitat where you have a longer growing season, you can get the fruit, which is so tasty, which is the passion fruit, but some folks in our region call it maypop, and it's so yummy. And but yeah, you can harvest these leaves and the flowers. Actually, this is a different species than the one that mostly grows around here, so the leaves might look a little bit different, but they are just wonderfully calming. So a gentle sedative. The nice thing is they help with insomnia, but it won't put you to sleep. So interesting how that works. But basically you can take it as tea or tincture during the day and it will not put you to sleep. But if you're up at night and you can't sleep and you have circular thinking, so your thoughts just keep going round and round, it can stop that and help you get back to sleep. It can also help with that circular thinking during the day. And just general stress, but it's also an antispasmodic. So that's just a fancy word to say that it can help stop muscle spasms and also like muscle tightness. So I really love it for all of those things. And again, I feel like we all need that. I mean, besides the craziness of the last year and a half or so, there's also just like that feeling of the end of summer where we're just all kind of worn ragged, right? So it's a nice one. It has a lovely taste to it as well, to the tea and the tincture. So check that one out. Okay, does anybody have any questions? I am here for you. So please ask them. This is your chance. Get a sip my delicious tea. And while you're thinking of your questions, one, of course, I want to say thank you. I appreciate y'all so much. Thanks for sticking in with me. If you think about a question later, feel free to send it to me. My email is abby@thewanderschool.com. And I wanted to just let you know about some of the cool stuff coming up. If you're in the region, we have, I'm in Burnsville, and so Saturday the 18th, we have a fall first aid and wild food walk, which I'm really excited about. It's at this beautiful spot where I've led a couple walks already called High Pastures. It's a 730-acre retreat center with a waterfall and amazing woods and open spaces. It's just gorgeous. So join us for that. Register soon. I'm also doing this cool new thing, plant walk immersion series. So it's going to be on Thursdays from September 23rd through October 28th. And you can find these all on the events page under offerings at thewanderschool.com. But we're going to go out on Thursdays within an hour of Asheville and take hikes at different parks and areas, wild areas, and just learn. It's so great to do that every week because it gets those plants reinforced in your brain. And I know that everybody is feeling lonely. And so it's a great way to hang out with people outside where you can feel safe and learn those plants and be around like-minded people. And then something I'm super excited about is this series I'm doing with my Cherokee friends just on the edge of Cherokee in Whittier, North Carolina, the first 3 Sundays of October with the group, the organization that is now, it may change the name, but it's now called the Big Witch Indian Cooperative. And we're doing a series. If you want to find out more about my friends there, my friend Tyson Sampson, I interviewed him in my podcast, Wander, Forage, and Wildcraft, which you can find on my website or anywhere else pretty much. And he's just an amazing person. And we're co-founding the cooperative. We're going to have a Cherokee herb school next year, which I'm super excited about. But we're going to teach this series on food preservation, including fermentation and wild foods. That'll be the first Sunday. The second Sunday, we're going to be doing, I think, one of them we're going to be doing twigs and bark and branches. I think that's the second one. And then the last one, we're going to do roots and nuts and make medicine out of those, eat them, preserve them. And then we'll also be working with mushrooms all of those days. So really exciting. There will also be some Cherokee elders involved. So please check that out. Also, if you're in the region, you can get a botanical property survey, which I do. So contact me or look at it on the website and I'll come to you. You'll get a private plant walk. You can invite anybody you want. I'll make you a spreadsheet from all the information telling you what's edible, what's medicinal, what's poisonous on your land with notes about each plant. So fun stuff to check out. If you're not close by or you don't feel comfortable being in person, I also do virtual discovery sessions, which are really fun and they're online. So lots of things plus more all on the website. Happy to talk to you about them as well. Y'all are all welcome. Nobody has any questions. I guess that means I did a good job. So thank you too for being here. And whether you are here, whether you're not, you'll get an email very soon with the recording. So for those of you who are just on the recording, thank you so much for being here too. And I appreciate all of you. This is what I'm here for education. So please, a great way to learn this stuff is to teach somebody else. So go out, look at the plants, and teach somebody else, especially children, because they're the next generation and we need them, right? So thank you to everyone who was here, and I super appreciate all of y'all. And I hope to see you soon in the woods or online. I'm also designing a online medicine making course series for this fall, which I'm really excited about. So it'll be kind of like this and it'll be interactive too. All right, well, if nobody has any questions, I'm going to go ahead and go and have some dinner, hopefully some wild mushrooms. But thanks again, y'all, and happy wandering, foraging, and wild crafting.